Hey everybody, this is Dave Reynolds and welcome to another edition of Amazing Guitars Friday. And it's been a while since I've done a show. Didn't do anything during COVID, so. But I was drawn to do another show by my good friend Dale's journey that he's gone on to build a guitar. And it's an amazing guitar, and I learned about it by viewing some of your posts on Facebook or on social media.
Sure.
And it was pretty incredible how you documented the journey. And I know some people want to know a little more, as do I.
Sure.
So let's get rolling. So
all right.
It's the Shine Box guitar.
Shine Box, yes.
And what was some of the inspiration going back a little bit? Like, what was your grandfather, I know you said, was a phenomenal guitar player. Is there something there that inspired you?
Well, not directly, but yes. I grew up with guitars. You know, my dad was a guitarist, had a band for many, many years. My grandfather played all over the country, playing bluegrass and country and stuff like that. So I grew up with guitar, but I never really got into guitar until maybe college, where I took an interest in it. And then when I started working at Line 6 back in 2000, that's when I got more serious about guitar, because I was working in the industry and was surrounded with guitars, so it seemed silly not to pick it up.
Right.
And I've had a lot of guitars. I still have a lot of guitars, but too many. But I had a Les Paul Special double cutaway, which was a Gibson Custom Shop historic reissue of the 1960 Les Paul Special double cutaway. It was a fantastic guitar. Sounded great. A little heavy, but had P90 soap bar pickups in it. Great sounding guitar. I rarely played it. I didn't like the slabbiness of those guitars. They were very squared, thick bodied, and I don't like the way they sit on my arm, especially when I'm standing up and it's hanging there. And I just never played it a lot, so I ended up selling it to a good friend of mine who's a fantastic guitar player. And he had borrowed it for sessions a few times, and I was like, hey man, why don't I just maybe take this guitar. But I love the shape, I love the neck access that you have on a double cutaway. So when I had the opportunity to start building my own guitar, which I did as an after-hours project through my work, got approval to do this as kind of a learning exercise.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Because I had designed guitar. I designed the original Variax, which is now called the Variax 500.
Wow.
But that body shape was used for the 500, the 600, the 300, and then the 700. Although Eric Kirkland, who used to work at Line 6s with Vox guitars now, but he took that body shape and he did the carved profile for the top for the 700, which was the fancy one. But that body shape was my first shot at designing a guitar. So I designed a guitar, but I'd never built one, and I'm a firm believer, if you're going to be designing things, you should really understand how they go together. And everyone knows how a guitar goes together, but unless you've actually built one, there's a lot of little minutia that you don't take into consideration, like how hard it is to do certain things or to program certain things on a machine. If you're not building it by hand, which a lot of this was done on a CNC.
That's great. So is your engineering, is that hardware or software, or how does that come into play? So it's great that you have that combination. You're a guitar player, you know how guitar should feel.
I'm an industrial designer, I'm not an engineer. So for me, it's the aesthetic, the usability, the feel, the look and feel of things, how easy it is to navigate products like Helix and things like that. Foot spacing and knob spacing and the angles of things, and all that kind of stuff goes into how easy it is to use something. So anyway, I designed a guitar, and I wanted to learn more, and we had this wonderful luthier at Yazla Yamaha Artist Services LA, which is just up the road from our main Yamaha Guitar Group office. And so we got permission to build a guitar after hours, as long as I paid for everything that we used materials-wise. And we did it after hours. They're like, you can use the machine or use the shop, whatever, just your own time, your own money. So when we got approval to do that, my friend who was helping me do all this, let's face it, he did 95% of the work on this guitar, because a lot of it was done, the two of us working together, but him modeling it up, like modeling out the parts in 3D. He used a program called Rhino. And then he would do all the CAM, like programming it to run the NC to make the parts. But it was just like, he was like, well, what do you want to do here? And then we would play around with some ideas and we'd model it up. And then say, that looks really cool, let's make that. And so that's the whole thing was kind of a live thing. But again, it was an exercise so I would understand what went into actually making a custom guitar. But the process took 4 years.
Oh wow!
4 years. 4 years almost to the day from the first time we cut wood until I finished the last piece, which was this pickguard.
Wow.
Which I made at home. This pickguard and this cavity cover. This I made by hand. That was pretty easy. This, trying to get the perfect fit and the right thing, that was a bit more of a headache.
Yeah.
But there's a tenon. People that followed any of the build on my Facebook or whatever, there's actually the neck tenon goes out to about here, whereas on a Gibson, the tenon kind of just barely goes into the pickup route and then it ends.
Right.
So it's kind of a weak joint. They don't break, but
right.
you want to be aware of that. We also shifted everything on this Ford. The electronics or the pickups are shifted more to the neck position. I just kind of like that sound a little bit better if everything forward shifted a little. Normally a P90 would sit back here and you'd have pick guard here, and then this pick would be back here and the bridge would maybe be a little further back. But this is how I wanted it. This is how we did it. But there was a tenon. You can see the mahogany tenon back here to about here.
Okay.
And as much as I hate covering up the spalt, it really bothered me seeing the tenon. Some people think it was really cool being able to see that piece of wood sticking through the top. And the reason we did that is neither of us had ever done a spalted maple top. And if you know about spalted maple...
Yeah, I wanted you to talk a little bit about where the wood came from.
Well, the mahogany, the back and neck are all made, the body and neck are all made from a single board of old growth mahogany. That was a leftover from the original Variax days, from Eric Kirkland, I think.
Oh, okay.
We had a wood shop back at our old building where he could make prototype bodies and stuff in our wood shop, because he came from Gibson prior to that, maybe not immediately prior, but at one point he had worked at Gibson in their custom shop. So he had bought this wood, and then he left the company to go do other things. The wood moved with us to a new building, and it sat in the wood shop forever. This like an 8-foot, 2.5-inch thick by maybe 10-inch wide plank of old growth mahogany. Beautiful wood. Had a few wormholes in it, which is probably why he never used it. But it sat forever, and then during one of the annual cleanups in the office, it was sitting out there, going to throw it out in the dumpster. And I was like, no, save that wood. And they're like, you can have it, but you got to get it out of here. You can't leave it here. So I took it home, and it sat in my unair-conditioned Southern California garage for 14 years.
Oh my God.
Just cooking in the heat, but it never warped, it never split, it's just stable, like a rock.
Wow.
So when I told my friend that I had this piece of wood, he's like, well, bring it in, we'll cut it up, and we'll see, what we can get out of it. And it turned out we had enough for a body and 2, maybe 3 necks. So that's where the wood came from. The only remaining wormhole, you can kind of see, I don't know if you'll see it on the camera, there's a little dot right here. Where
you see that.
I filled it with a little sawdust and wood glue. But there was a wormhole here. There was a wormhole here. There was probably a wormhole here. You know what I mean?
Can you spin it around?
Yeah. There were little wormholes where we laid everything out. We laid it all out around to avoid those things. This was the only one we couldn't avoid.
That's great.
But whatever, it's on the back, and it's part of the guitar. It's what it is. The top of all places, I was looking for spalted maple. I have another spalted guitar, a Tyler custom-made guitar. And I just love the uniqueness of spalt, which if you don't know, spalted maple, it's a maple tree that fell over and started taking in moisture from the ground.
Okay.
So this black that you see is the softest part of the grain, and that's where mold starts to take. So this black is actually mold in the grain of the wood, because it's like you ever heard of sinker mahogany or sinker pine. That's a tree that fell into a river and sat underwater for years and years and years, and they got pulled out, dried out, and sawn up.
Right.
But it takes on a certain property from being submerged for some years. This is the same thing. It takes on this mold from taking in moisture on the ground. And then when you cut it, you get these crazy patterns. No two pieces are the same ever. I was trying to find a piece, and all the luthier exchange places wanted crazy money for spalt. And I found this piece of all places on Etsy. This guy up in Washington State has a ranch that happens to have a small sawmill, and he had this piece and another piece of flame maple sitting on his Etsy for years, I guess. And I messaged him, he goes, oh gosh, I never checked my email. I'm like, yeah, I still got that. So he sent it down, and the thing I didn't like about the Les Paul Special Double Cut, that slabbiness. And so I was like, well, I want to do like an arm carve and a belly carve, like a strap, which if you try to hold that to the camera, you can kind of see the angle there, and then on the back you have this belly carve, which just makes it a lot more comfortable. When you're sitting, it's not beating your rib cage and armrests here, nice and comfortable.
And what did you call? Was it a hand grab on your post? Did you call?
This little carve back
yeah.
here? I called it a hand carve. It wasn't something we planned on. This isn't the exact shape of a Les Paul Special Double Cutaway. It's very, very close. I mean, it fits in the Gibson case.
Right.
But it's a little tight in here, I think. And, you know, I tend to play wrist back when I play. Some people play down here, and so for them, getting up here is no big deal. That's why you'll see PRS, they tend to carve here out the front because people can slide their hand in like that. I tend to play behind the heel. So I just made this little cut. I just did that by hand before I went in for paint. And I tried to follow this contour, keep it looking good, and blend it into the neck heel.
That's great.
But you know, now I can slide my hand up here comfortably and get right up to that 21st fret. Because I shred up here all the time.
Yeah. So and then the shine box. You've got that. You had mentioned that that's the one thing on the guitar, the headstock, that you can trademark.
Yeah, you can trademark your headstock. That's what you can't make. You can make a Fender Strat body, but you can't put a Fender headstock on your guitar, or the Agency. That we saw that in the '70s. That was the lawsuit era Gibsons with Bernie and a bunch of other Japanese clones of Gibson guitars. There were a ton of them in the '70s, and Gibson sued and won.
Right.
They said, hey, you can copy. Gibson's tried to sue for even a single cutaway body shape. They did that with PRS in the early 2000s. They did this PRS single cutaway. They won the first round of court, saying, hey, you can't make a single cutaway guitar, and that went to appeal, which they then lost.
Right.
But the courts have been pretty clear. You can't protect the shape of your body, but your headstock is your brand identity.
That's interesting.
So a Telecaster headstock, everyone knows that's a Fender Telecaster. You know, the Strat, even the '70s Strat with the big wing, that's all Fender. Gibson's book, the open book headstock, that's Gibson. You can't copy that. That's illegal. You'll get your guitars impounded and everything shut down. So that's the hard thing. That with the Variax, the original Variax, I designed 50, 60 different headstocks for that guitar, and we didn't use any of them. In the end, that kind of generic headstock, I don't know. Maybe Eric came up with that. I don't know exactly where that came from. It wasn't one of my concepts. So we knew we wanted to do 3 and 3 on that guitar, but I think Eric came up with that final design. That's what they used.
Right. That's neat.
But it's hard. I mean, the headstock is hard. And, and this one, I just kind of came up. Maybe it's easier to see from the back, but that's a shape I came up with, which I really like. It works. Then I just mimicked it with the truss rod cover. It's
I love
that.
Yeah, the one for one. You had said that this is the only one.
One of one. Yeah, it's got the one strike one. It's a one of one. It's the only one like it. And I did that on my little. I bought a little Chinese-made NC, a little 3018 desktop CNC router, just so I could make the truss rod cover and the pickguard.
That's cool. The other interesting thing was you mentioned, and I can't remember, honing, something that you did with the pickguard plates.
The vapor. Yes. The pickup rings.
Yeah,
the pickup rings.
Rings.
They're just your generic plastic StewMac parts, but they come shiny black plastic. You can get them in cream or white too, I guess. But I wanted it black. I like black and nickel. I like very subtle. I like subtle. Generally, I don't like gold hardware. I don't like really flashy stuff. I don't like lots of fancy inlay. But yeah, they're the black plastic was very shiny, like a pickguard, and it shows all the little sink marks in the plastic. But I have a vapor honing machine, which is kind of like a sandblaster but wet. It works with water, so it doesn't remove material the way a sandblaster does. I use it for restoring motorcycle parts. But I stuck the pickup rings in there and gave them a good blast, and it just takes the sheen off and gives them kind of a bead blasted finish.
Man,
which just makes them look a lot nicer than just black shiny plastic.
So yeah, you didn't leave every detail. You really put a lot of thought.
Yeah,
into it.
like I said, the pickups. These my buddy Rob Timmons, Arcane Pickups. He custom wound these for me. They're his. He calls them his. I don't want to get it wrong. Magnetron pickups. They're basically his take on a TV Jones Ultratron pickup, but they're in a humbucker format because normal Ultratrons are a little bigger, closer to the size of a P90.
Right.
And I wanted to be able to swap these out if I ever want to change them to something. I didn't want to be stuck with that format.
Right.
And they sound great. Everything Rob does sounds great. The bridge is a German ABM Bell brass nickel plated bridge. Super adjustable, but the posts are not the ones that came with the bridge there from some other company that I'm spacing on at the moment. But they're locking, so when you take the strings off, the bridge doesn't fall.
Right.
Because a lot of times with these type of tail pieces, they just slip on. You know, you can set the height, but they just slip on, and as soon as you take the strings off, they just fall off.
Exactly.
So these Tone Pros. So these are Tone Pros locking bridge posts. So when I take the strings off, the bridge doesn't move.
Perfect.
You know, this is a push-pull, although these pickups they just get weak when you split them. But if I ever put humbuckers in there, I could split them. So that's set for that. Basic dot inlays. You know,
you mentioned that some of the inlays are they glow in the dark, or what did you say about
the edge dots.
Yeah,
these are all made of luminol.
Yeah.
So you know, if you put them under a bright light for a while, and then you got to go play in the dark. I mean, they stay lit for a good 45 minutes.
That's
like,
cool.
In pitch black, you can see them bright green. It's funny. I have one of those lawsuit era '70s Les Paul Special clones that has P90s in it. I'm trying to remember the company that makes that. Doesn't matter. But it didn't have side inlay markers. And I never realized that I used them. It's not something you think about.
Right.
Like, oh, yeah, I use those all the time. No one's going to say that. But it didn't have them. And I found every time I'd be playing, I'd look down, I'd be like, I have no idea where I'm at on the guitar. And so when I had worked on that guitar, I think I add side dot markers to it.
Because the classical guitars traditionally don't come with them. So I would go have a luthier put at least one in.
So you have a reference point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not like you're looking like this when you're playing. You know, if anything, you're going to glance down. But especially when you have a guitar like this, if you're used to a Strat, you know, or any number of other guitars, you're used to the 12th fret feeling back here by the body. You know, and here, because the neck is set so far in, you know, the 12th fret's here. You know, you have all this access, but for muscle memory, if you're used to playing a different guitar, you might slide for the 12th fret and find yourself up at the 14th.
That's neat.
Because it's, you know, you're just not used to it.
And so what about, like, how do you feel after having done this as the project that you had talked about? What is your sort of analysis in the end about this guitar, what you love about it? Is there anything that you would change, or do you feel like you nailed everything?
Oh, there's always room for improvement.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I learned a lot. You know, it's so much. There's so much more work that goes into making an electric guitar than what you think. Especially something with a set neck, especially with a spalted top. Again, because it's fragile wood, so bending it was very, you know, bending it for this arm carve, because you know the top isn't thick enough to just hog this out. You had to actually kerf cut and bend to the wood, but it's very weak where the mold is in the grain and it wants to separate. So you know, there's a lot of steaming involved, and bending and clamping, and even going back in with CA, you know, super glue, and gluing in where it started to lift, and pressing it and with a little activator, you know, to set it, to make sure it stays there. And you know, once it's finished and it's smooth, you're good.
Right.
But yeah, there was a lot of hairy moments with this guitar. You know, there were things. My buddy that was working on it with me, you know, he had this great idea, because again, the spalted top. Originally, I was going to do a bursted finish like my other Spalt guitar, and then I didn't want to hide any of this. So I had already bought beige, you know, the tan binding, and then I was like, well, that's going to disappear because it's not bursted now. You won't see it. So I switched to the black binding, and when I did that, he was like, you know, we could not set the binding at full depth and then leave this. It might be hard to see on camera, but we'll leave the spalted cap exposed.
Wow.
And then you end up with this pinstripe that is the spalt, so you can see the same graining, and it's really cool when you get around the other side because it follows the curvature.
Oh wow!
And I've never seen that before, and that was his idea, and I think it just really sets the guitar off. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, the pictures you posted really were outstanding. I mean, it's so pretty to see that up close.
You know, the pickguard, originally I designed it more like a Gibson pickguard to come down here into the horn a little bit and come up. And that little NC that I bought, it's not big enough.
Oh.
I got it all laid out and done, and I had cut out a dozen paper templates and fit them to make sure everything is perfect. And I went to lay it out on the little CNC router. I realized it was too big for this. You know, it's only got this little working area like this big. So I redesigned it to the center line of the pickup, and it worked out fine. But again, the whole goal was to just cover that tenon.
Right.
You know, but this is very much like the Gibson shape, you know, which, you know, it kicks back here so it misses the bridge. But I just shortened it up a bit, which is great because you get to see more of the spalt. You know, and then the painter that I hired, he did this honeyburst finish, and he did this kind of vintage on the back, which he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah,
he just did such a fantastic job with the paint. Yeah, I'm.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Oh boy. My volume's down.
Okay.
Oh, your volume.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm not much of a player.
Oh wow. Yes.
It's a growly. When the neck is. It's just got a little mellow sound. But, you know.
Sounds great.
You take it for a spin.
Yeah,
Let's hear what it can actually do. Because I'm not a great player. I just love guitar.
Yeah, I love the feel of the guitar now. I think that you did knock it out of the park in terms of the, fits my body really well.
Right now you got both pickups, so.
Yeah, I usually play that neck. Great job on this, Dan.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, excellent guitar.
It's been a real joy having it done.
And you'll be making more, not exactly like this one.
Maybe someday. I don't know.
Yeah, but man, well, thanks for coming on, Dan, and talking to me about this, and just great guitar. Yeah. And thanks for watching, and hope everybody had enjoyed hearing that. Thanks a lot.